What's up? This is Technically Correct with Tyler Bischoff. On today's show, the Raiders had their best Sunday of the season. They could have the number one pick in the NFL draft. Plus, UNLV football lost to Boise State again. What does it mean for this historic 3-year run? And the Golden Knights walked off the Rangers with one of the best plays in franchise history. Technically Correct needs a sponsor. I know you want to sponsor the show. I would love you so much if you sponsored the show. Technically Correct Vegas at gmail.com is where you can reach out to me. We can have a lot of fun with it. I can tell everybody how great you are. I'm good at telling everybody how great I am. Just imagine how good I'd be at telling everybody how great you are if you gave me some money. Technically Correct Vegas at gmail.com. Here we go. The Raiders control their own destiny for the number one pick in the NFL draft. Probably. We'll get to that, though. First off, Sunday was incredible for the Raiders. You had the Saints beat the Buccaneers and the Titans pick up their second win of the season in a game against Cleveland, an unexpected shootout against the Browns. And what it means is that the Raiders now at 2-11, tied for the worst record in the NFL with the Giants and the Titans, and would currently have the second overall pick in the draft. The tiebreaker is strength of schedule. The easier your strength of schedule is, the better your pick is. And right now, the Giants have the easiest strength of schedule, then the Raiders, then the Titans of those 2-11 teams. So the Raiders are in control of their own destiny for the NFL draft because they play the New York Giants, which means head-to-head, they can lose and jump ahead of the New York Giants. And then it would only be the Tennessee Titans. Technically, the Titans could pass the Raiders on the strength of schedule tiebreaker, though as of now, it is the Raiders with that tiebreaker. So if the Raiders manage to lose out, they should have the number one pick in the NFL draft. And honestly, it shouldn't be that difficult because their last 4 games, they play the Eagles. I know that offense is struggling, but they're a lot better than the Raiders. Then that showdown with the Giants that could decide the number one pick in the NFL draft. And then they finish with the Houston Texans. And finally, the Kansas City Chiefs. I know their playoff hopes are on the line, but if the Chiefs are still playing for anything in that final week, you'd have to imagine they're going to beat the Raiders. That is a doable lose-out. That is a possible lose-out to get to 2-15 and get the number one pick in the NFL draft. Now, what's interesting to me is if you go back and look at the Raiders' recent history, they don't pick very high a lot despite being bad. Right? Last year was 6th overall. 2019, they had the 4th overall pick. They used it on Clelin Ferrell. 2015 and 14, they had back-to-back top 5 picks. They went Amari Cooper and Khalil Mack. Those ones actually worked out pretty well. But mostly they sort of pick around 10 or so. They're rarely bad enough to actually get the top pick in the draft or anywhere close to the top pick in the draft. And they can do it this year. But here's the issue. Any win, disaster, right? And these other teams are probably going to win some games too. So it's not like winning a game and everybody else is just going to continue to lose out. We just saw the Titans win a game. But right now, there are 5 teams that are 3-10. 5 of them, right? For example, the Raiders lose the tiebreaker with all but one of them. So for example, had the Raiders, let's just say, beaten the Broncos yesterday, instead of sitting at 2, they'd be sitting at pick number 7. So any win can be catastrophic, right? If they lose out, it's probably the first pick in the draft. If they win once, I think it's reasonable to say they fall to the 4, 5, 6 range, something like that. And God forbid they win 2 of these last 4 games. Then all of a sudden, I mean, they might be outside of the top 10, right? We're talking about picking 8, 9, or even worse than that. So wins here in December, wins here in the final 4 games of the season is going to be bad. And I think there's two things that's important for like understanding the value of having the number one pick. The first one is sort of the obvious one. You need a franchise quarterback if you're the Raiders. And if you have the number one pick in the draft, you can get a franchise quarterback. In theory, right? If there's one that's out there, you don't have to trade up. You don't have to hope that he falls. You can just take the guy that you think is the franchise quarterback, right? If you get convinced that Dante Moore or Fernando Mendoza or somebody is your franchise quarterback, you can take him at number one overall, and that's it. That's the pick, and you hope that it works out, but that's what you do if you think that guy is out there. But the other side of this might be a little anticlimactic, but trading out of the number one pick can give you so much. And granted, if the Raiders don't think there's a franchise quarterback out there, maybe nobody else does, and the first round pick is not quite as valuable. But if somebody wants to come up to number one and you don't think Fernando Mendoza or Dante Moore or somebody else is the guy, you trade down and take an offensive lineman and then just accumulate a bunch of assets. Because if you look back at the two most recent trades of the number one pick, the Bears traded for it in 2023. Carolina fell back to pick number 9 in 2023. And what'd they get out of that? They went back to 9. They also got DJ Moore, a first round pick the following year, and 2 more second round picks. So they got 3 high level picks, asset picks, and a player that was young and good out of the number one pick to go from 1 to 9. Then you go back to 2016, the Rams traded for the number one pick with the Titans. The Titans fell all the way back to 15 in that draft, so quite a ways. But they got an extra first, 2 more seconds, and 2 more thirds. Now, they did send a fourth and a sixth, so they did have to send some back-end picks, but they got 5 picks out of that to go from 1 to 15. It doesn't happen that often, right? And again, it is important to note, like, how good is that quarterback is going to be important. Somebody else is going to have to think that Mendoza or Moore is the guy, is the franchise quarterback. But if you can manage that trade, you are going to get a haul of assets. So having the number one pick gives you a chance at that franchise quarterback. That is the number one thing. That is what you need as an organization. That's what you should be trying to get. But if you don't think it's there, the other option is getting all of these assets. And guess what? The Raiders need a franchise quarterback, but they need a lot more. There are tons of holes on this offense, right? They need a number one wide receiver. They need what? 4 new offensive linemen and a healthy Colton Miller. They need players on the defensive line. They need every spot in the secondary, probably. Like, they can use so much. And if you trade back from 1 to 8 or 12 or whatever it is, and you get an additional first the next year and 2 seconds and a third or something like that, right? We're not talking about a handful of really good assets over 2 off seasons that you can use to build the roster up and potentially get a quarterback in the following draft, right? The next draft, maybe there's a quarterback you like more, and now you have these assets and you trade up to go get that quarterback, whatever it is. But you have the assets to do so much, and that's why getting the number one pick is important, and the Raiders now control their destiny. They can do it with help from no one else. Lose out, and they should be in good shape. Now, for this year's team, for this weekend's game, we're going to have a quarterback conversation, it looks like. The Raiders, Kenny Pickett finished this game because Geno Smith left injured. Now, Geno actually had 2 different injuries. He injured his throwing hand. After the game, Pete Carroll sounded like he just got cut and they had to stop the bleeding. But he also left the game with an actual shoulder injury. And Pete Carroll, the phrase he used afterwards was that it locked up. Whatever that means for this week or the rest of the season, I don't know. We'll see what they have to do with Geno Smith. Obviously, if he's injured and can't play, this isn't much of a conversation. But with Geno Smith out, Kenny Pickett played. He was 8 of 11 for 97 yards and a touchdown. Now, Kenny Pickett played against the Broncos defense in the fourth quarter when they were down 2 scores, and it was at least looked to be a somewhat passive defense, more of a, okay, let's just not give up the 70-yard play that might give the Raiders a chance, make them drive the length of the field. But Pickett had a really good touchdown pass. It was an excellent pass, right? And he looked solid. I mean, looked better than Geno Smith has looked in like 90% of the games that he has played this season. So what does that mean for the last 4 games of the year and the quarterback position? Should it be Kenny Pickett? Is that the answer regardless of Geno Smith's health? I think ultimately this highlights the offseason that the Raiders missed on for the quarterback position, because who cares if Kenny Pickett plays the last 4 games of the year? Do you think Kenny Pickett is the quarterback of the future for the Raiders? Are we sitting around thinking, wondering, hoping that Kenny Pickett is going to be the guy that turns things around for the Raiders next year and beyond? Because that's not reality. Kenny Pickett's not the quarterback for the future. Geno Smith is not the quarterback for the future. Aiden O'Connell is not the quarterback for the future. He's still on the roster. So I don't think it matters, right? The quarterback of the future is not on the roster. The only reasonable expectation that the Raiders are starting one of these quarterbacks next year is because they're committed to the tank, right? Didn't draft a quarterback high, and they just said, all right, we took a different position in the draft. We didn't want to spend any free agent money on a quarterback because that's probably a bad idea most of the time. So we're going to just tank next season, and here's another year of Geno Smith or Kenny Pickett or Aiden O'Connell, whatever you want it to be. So I just don't think it matters, because what if Kenny Pickett plays really well in the final 4 games of the season? You now convinced he's the guy? Right? I mean, hell, the same for Geno Smith. What if Geno Smith has a really good 4 games? He's been terrible this year. There's no way that 4 games at the end of the year is going to change your mind on what he did this season. There's just no upside to any quarterback on the roster. So it'll be like the least important quarterback battle or conversation of all time, because there's not really much on the line as far as the future goes and what the Raiders should be looking for. Now, something good that we did see against Denver. There were a good bit of rookies playing. Now, there's still some criticism that's going to be attached to this, but Caleb Rogers played the entire game at right guard, finally got to play last week. They started him, but then he didn't even play the most snaps at right guard. This week, they started him. He played the full game. Now, the offensive line wasn't necessarily any better, but the Raiders drafted this guard, Caleb Rogers, in the 3rd round. They have the worst offensive line in the NFL, and it took until week 14 for him to play a full game. It's brutal, right? But at least they did it before the season ended, and I'm guessing, as long as he's healthy, he's going to get to play basically all of the offensive snaps the rest of the way. Just play him the last 4, see what you have in Caleb Rogers. Maybe he proves, best case scenario, he proves to be worthy as a starter. And now cool, we got our starting right guard for next year. Or he proves to not be worthy of a starter. And now all right, we don't have our starting right guard for next year. You need the information on Caleb Rogers to know what to do in the offseason, because you drafted this guy in the 3rd round. And if you didn't play him and then you go in the next one, you're like, all right, what do we have in him? And you don't know? That's pretty bad. We also saw Jack Besh. I'll have to look at the snap counts, but I'm pretty sure he was out there for most of the 2 wide receiver sets. It was Trey Tucker and Jack Besh. So I'm going to guess he played the 2nd most wide receiver snaps before seeing the actual snap count there. He led the team with 6 targets, led the team with 6 catches, led the team with 50 yards receiving. None of those are blow you away type of numbers. It is the Raiders offense, but they're all career highs for Jack Besh, and they are all first on the team in that game. It's just like the Caleb Rogers situation. You need to learn something here. How good is Jack Besh? You drafted this guy in the 2nd round. You drafted a wide receiver in round 2, and it took until week 14 for him to get 6 targets in a game. Like, that's terrible as far as a asset roster management for a team that's screaming towards the number 1 pick in the draft. But how good is Jack Besh, right? Can he be the number 1 wide receiver? Probably not, right? I'm going to assume We would have seen him a lot more if he was that good. I didn't think he was going to be that level of good when the Raiders drafted him. But can he be the number 2 wide receiver? Can he be the number 2 wide receiver that's really the third option in this passing game because Brock Bowers exists? Or is he worse than that, right? Those are the things you want to find out about these players. Also, they took another offensive lineman, Charles Grant, in the 3rd round. He has basically not played this season, so he should get out there as well. But we did see some rookies play, which is something that Pete Carroll has been hesitant to do, but we finally saw it. Keep doing it. There's 4 games left. Just keep pushing through, Pete. That's all you got to do. Play the rookies. Another very important note for me from this game. You might have watched this game, or you might have checked the box score and thought, oh, Bo Nix had a good game. He was 31 of 38. Wow. I'm here to tell you, Bo Nix was not good. Bo Nix completed a lot of passes. How many of them were over 15 yards? None. Bo Nix, when throwing the ball 15 yards or more down the field, was 0 of 3. He threw 38 passes. 3 of them went beyond 15 yards in the air. And only 1 was over 20 yards in the air, an incompletion that traveled 25 yards down the field. He was a perfect 13 of 13 when throwing between 0 and 5 yards down the field. And he was a perfect 8 of 8 when throwing behind the line of scrimmage. I mean, he was dissecting those defenses and showing off his arm talent on those passes. Bo Nix averaged 5.6 yards per attempt. Before the 4th quarter, when the Broncos kind of committed to just handing the ball off and running the clock out, through 3 quarters, the Broncos were averaging more yards per carry than they were averaging yards per attempt. They were getting more yards by just turning and handing it off than they were letting Bo Nix throw the ball, despite him completing 31 of 38. They did not ask Bo Nix to throw the ball down the field. They did not ask Bo Nix to do anything special because the Broncos are afraid of Bo Nix throwing it down the field, specifically against zone defenses, because he's one of the worst quarterbacks in the league against zone defenses. The Raiders play the most zone coverage in the NFL. Great example of this is 3rd and 3. They're in the red zone. Does Bo Nix throw the ball 3 yards down the field, 5 yards down the field, maybe even into the end zone, right? Could happen. No. Bo Nix on a 3rd and 3 threw it 5 yards behind the line of scrimmage to his running back, R.J. Harvey, who then ran through 2 Raiders defenders and got the first down. That was Bo Nix's contribution to the team. He wasn't bad. He obviously didn't lose them the game. He didn't make any terrible plays, but Bo Nix didn't do anything noteworthy. He threw a lot of checkdowns. He threw a lot of short routes. It was very much a Bo Nix just get the ball out and get the ball out to guys that are very, very close to you. You can hand the ball to them almost. And that's not a good game. That is not an awesome game from Bo Nix. That's kind of the best case scenario for a game from Bo Nix is exactly that. All right, a couple other things from this game. First off, Pete Carroll into the first half. I mean, what are we doing? What is going on with coaching decisions here? So the Raiders get a 4th down stop, and they get the ball back on their own 41-yard line with 20 seconds left, right? So they got a chance to put up points. Field goal is definitely in the realm of possibility. 4th and 3. They get to 4th and 3 at the 48-yard line with 7 seconds left and a timeout. So the Raiders, you get like 10 yards. You can run out and kick like a 58-yard field goal. And important note, they have a timeout. So you can throw it over the middle, call your timeout. There's 7 seconds left. This is going to take 4, 5, 6 seconds. You're going to have time to complete a 10-yard pass over the middle, call timeout, and try this field goal. Before this 4th down, the Broncos call a timeout. All right, cool. Raiders come out of this timeout, and what do? Pete Carroll burns his last timeout before the play, which now means you can't throw the ball over the middle for 10 yards, call a timeout, and kick a field goal. If you complete a pass in the field of play, the half is over. So the Raiders tried a Hail Mary. Geno Smith got sacked. He got sacked with time on the clock, which meant Denver got to try the Hail Mary instead of the Raiders. So you gave up the Hail Mary chance too. It's not just the field goal. You gave away the Hail Mary chance and gave Denver a chance. What the hell is that? Like, how is the head coach that's got decades of experience? The whole point he's here was to bring the head coaching experience and stability here, and you burn that timeout. What are you doing? I mean, what an absolute nightmare of an end to the first half. And the genuine question is: Pete Carroll better than Antonio Pierce at any of this? Yes, they've been better at fourth downs. They go for it at the right time more often than anybody in the NFL. So he is better than Antonio Pierce at that. But like, that's a terrible use of a timeout that I don't understand what Pete Carroll was thinking. Why you would call that timeout to set up a Hail Mary instead of, hey, can we get 10 to 12 yards in about 5 seconds? Call the timeout and attempt a field goal. It's just stupid. It's just dumb management of the clock, of your timeouts, and of the game. And the last thing on it, the Raiders had one of the most incredible covers of all time. Broncos favored by 8.5 points. Denver led by 10. They had the ball at the Raiders 28. They had a 4th and 4 with 1:04 left. So you kick a field goal and you go up by 13. Nope, they decide to go for it. They don't get it. But that's okay. They give the Raiders the ball back. We're talking about a minute here, and you're up by 10 points. Well, Kenny Pickett actually completes some passes, and eventually Kenny Pickett completes a pass to Tyler Lockett at the Denver 33-yard line. Here's the problem. Raiders have used all their timeouts, and the clock's running. We're under 10 seconds, right? They're not going to get up and be able to spike this ball in time. The game is going to end. But Brandon Jones of the Broncos goes up, rips the ball away from Tyler Lockett. That's a penalty. And the refs throw the flag for a delay of game, which stops the clock and allows the Raiders to trot Daniel Carlson onto the field with 5 seconds left, who kicks the field goal, and the Raiders lose by 7 in a game in which they were 8.5-point underdogs. Incredible. Now, one of the interesting things is after the game, Pete Carroll kind of briefly explained like why he kicked that field goal. You're down 10, there's 5 seconds left, so throw the ball to the end zone is generally what you'd see more of. But Pete Carroll basically said after the game that on that drive, they wanted to get in the field goal range, kick the field goal, and then go onside kick to try to get the ball back and, throw a Hail Mary on the final play to try to tie the game with a touchdown. Maybe they could have gone for 2 to try to win it, right? That was the idea. That's sort of what you should be doing in that scenario is once you get into field goal range, just go kick it so that maybe there's a little bit of time left for the onside kick and the Hail Mary. The problem is when the Raiders ran the field goal unit onto the field, there were 5 seconds left. The clock ran out on that kick. There's no way to kick the field goal, then recover the onside kick, then throw a Hail Mary. There's only time for one of those 3 plays, not 3 of those 3 plays. So I don't think it deserves that much criticism because nothing would have changed in the outcome. And you can't argue that Daniel Carlson needs more reps than anybody else on the team because he's kicking for his job. But like, Pete Carroll can't change his strategy. Like the clock runs down and you don't think, hey, we should change what we're doing here. It's just, nope, this was the strategy before the drive started. So this is exactly what I'm going to do. This is the only thing I know how to do because that was the set in stone plan and we can't change anything. Not great. Now it's time for Bischoff's Briefs. Go Army, beat Navy. I don't think I've ever had a rooting interest in the Army-Navy game, but I do now. Thanks to Rob. Rob, a former listener of the Press Box. And Rob, I love you right now. Rob has sponsored Bischoff's Briefs for the entire week and probably the best use of it that he could do because he just simply wants me to say, go Army, beat Navy. Leading up to this game, that's all he wants. And Rob, I appreciate it. It's phenomenal use of sponsoring this show is to just get me to say, go Army, because that game matters now to me. I hope Army wins because of Rob. So thank you to Rob, not only for sponsoring it, but for listening to me for so long. If you want to sponsor anything in the show, technicallycorrectvegas@gmail.com. Now, the Golden Knights played on Sunday. They won. They beat New York. They beat the Rangers in overtime. The Golden Knights ended that game in overtime on one of the coolest plays that I think I've seen from this franchise. Jack Eichel had an awesome goal. There's 16.9 seconds left in overtime. They have a defensive zone faceoff. Brett Howden wins that faceoff back to Shea Theodore. And when Howden wins it, Jack Eichel just takes off up the ice. There is no thought in his mind about, maybe Theodore's going to play the puck around the boards to me. Maybe I need to be an outlet, an easy pass for Theodore, and I'll take it and skate up the ice. Nope. He just drives the net off of a defensive zone faceoffs. And Shea Theodore plays a pass off the boards that bounces directly into Eichel's path. Eichel picks it up. He's got a breakaway. He scores. He finishes off the game. It was awesome, right? Genuinely, one of the coolest plays in franchise history. I love to say hockey is dumb, right? And one of the big reasons I say that is so many times in the sport, an unintentional deflection, helps lead to a goal, if not the goal itself, right? Positioning's important. Owning the puck is important, right? All of that. It doesn't mean you're not good at hockey because a bounce happens, but like take the Golden Knights game tying goal in this one. They've got their 5-on-4 with the goalie pull, and Mark Stone, there's a puck kind of near the crease. Mark Stone tries to shoot on a rebound, but his shot gets deflected by a Rangers defenseman and then just pops into the slot for Tomas Hertl, who makes a good play with his backhand to actually elevate it and score the game-tying goal, right? Again, Golden Knights own the puck. They were in good position. They've got the puck in a dangerous area, and there's two guys there. I'm not taking away credit for that, but they scored the game-tying goal largely because a Mark Stone shot got deflected, right? In just about any other sport, if your shot or pass gets deflected, it's a disaster, right? In basketball, it's getting blocked or it's a steal going the other way. In football, it's an incomplete pass. In baseball, it's an error. But in hockey, it just bounces kindly to your teammate who scores. That's why I love to say hockey is dumb, because a lot of things happen that are unintentional. But this Eichel play was precision. This Eichel play was perfect. I mean, they win the draw and he's gone, and then Shea Theodore plays an unbelievable pass off the boards. I mean, the perfect angle. That was spectacular. That's the precision and skill that you gotta love to see. Spectacular goal, walk-off winner, all of it involved was great. And it means the Golden Knights won a game in overtime. Carter Hart's the answer to this team winning past regulation, because before they had Carter Hart, it was 7 straight losses and 8 of 9 on the season where they went past regulation and they lost in either overtime or the shootout. Now, Carter Hart, both games he's played, they've gone past regulation and they've won both of those games. Now, he only made one save in overtime. It's not like, oh my God, Carter Hart bailed him out. It was a pretty good save, but he only had to make one save in overtime. Overall, though, he had a good game. He saved 21 of 23 shots. I don't think either goal you look at and say, what the hell is Carter Hart doing, right? One of them, he gets sniped over his shoulder. But he was their best player in the second period, right? I don't know what happened in the second period. The Rangers kicked the Golden Knights' ass for 20 minutes, and then the first and third were the other way around. But the Rangers had 2.6 expected goals, so Hart was solid in that stat as well. It's two good performances. So we'll see how the split between Hart and Akira Schmid goes. I kind of wonder, how quickly does Cassidy trust Hart to be the top goalie? Because through 2 games, he's performed well enough that you'd say, all right, that's our number one goalie. But it's 2 games, right? I think it's very possible that Carter Hart's next 2 games are both average, below average, or even just bad. I think that's entirely possible here. So how quickly does Cassidy go to that trust? Do we just see a simple trade-off each game? Here's Schmid, here's Hart. Here's Schmid, here's Hart for 2 weeks, something like that? That would probably be my guess, unless one of them plays really, really well or really, really poorly. But for now, that's how I guess Cassidy does it. One other thing on Carter Hart, he got hurt in his first game against Chicago. Not enough to come out of the game, but he got hurt apparently, according to Bruce Cassidy. Then they go on the road trip and he aggravates this injury in practice. And he wasn't healthy enough to be the backup to Akira Schmid for their game in Chicago. But then he was healthy enough for their game last night. And so I'm like, what did Carter Hart hurt? Because it wasn't serious enough to come out of the game he played, and then wasn't serious enough for them to hold him out of practice. But it was serious enough that he wasn't able to back up Akira Schmid. And then it wasn't serious enough again, or healed quick enough to be the starter yesterday. Very bizarre injury situation with Carter Hart to go from not serious to not serious, all in the span of 5 days. And the last thing on this, I got beef with Scripps Sports apparently because the Golden Knights tied this game in the final. They were losing. They won this game in overtime, but they were 50-something seconds away from losing this game in regulation, getting no points out of it. They pull the goalie in a 4-on-4 situation, right? And that game was in a 4-on-4 situation because Brett Howden and Will Borgen both took roughing penalties. But we never saw those penalties because they happened away from the puck. So during live play, the camera angle was actually a tight one on Zach Whitecloud. So you couldn't see what was happening with any other player except Whitecloud when the whistles blew for this penalty. And then we just didn't see a replay. We just did not see a replay of what Brett Howden and Will Borgen did. We did see the Rangers head coach, Mike Sullivan, cussing multiple times, calling it a bullshit call, right? We saw that twice, but we didn't see the replay of the penalties. And it was a massive reason why the Golden Knights tied the game. They might not tie that game if there's no penalties and they just have to play 6-on-5 instead of 5-on-4. We just never saw it. Can we get a replay of these penalties in the final 2 minutes of the game that helped the Golden Knights tie it? Like, come on, where's it at? Also, UNLV won on Sunday. The Runnin' Rebels beat Stanford 75-74. Kamani Hamilton made a game-winning free throw with 3 seconds left. UNLV now 2-0 on the road. And I got to make sure I get this right because somebody's going to slap me if I don't. They're now 2-5 in Las Vegas. But their two best performances have come on the road at Memphis and at Stanford. Emmanuel Steffen made his debut, the 7-foot transfer from Arizona who had been out due to injury. And he had 18 and 10, right? Started the game, played over 30 minutes, and had a double-double. I will be completely honest. I did not watch that game closely, right? It's on at the same time as the Raiders and some other NFL games. I am my one-man protest against college basketball games happening during NFL Sundays. I'm going to watch it today, give you some more insight into that, hopefully a little bit more in-depth on tomorrow's show. But they got another win. They got another win on the road against the top 100 team in KenPom. UNLV football, we're going to get into the Mountain West Championship game a little bit later in the show, so stay tuned for that. But they're going to the Frisco Bowl against Ohio. Quick rundown, Ohio went 8-4 in the MAC this season. SP plus-wise, they were 82nd, which puts them kind of below most of the second-tier teams in the Mountain West. They did have a loss to Ohio State where they got blown out, but their other 3 losses were by 3 points, 6 points, and 4 points. So outside of playing Ohio State, they were competitive in every single game that they played. Offensively, second most points, second most yards in the MAC. Best rushing offense in the MAC. Their quarterback runs a lot, so that's going to be a potential issue for UNLV. But more importantly, this is the Scooters Coffee Frisco Bowl. There is a giant cup of coffee that holds 5 gallons of cold brew that the winning coach gets dumped on him by his players. So you replace the Gatorade bath with this 5-gallon coffee cup that gets dumped on the head coach. Dan Mullen's got to be ready. You got to be ready for a coffee bath because if you win the game, it's coming. Raiders cornerback Caillou Blue Kelly got carted off the field yesterday. He's a corner that was signed to the practice squad last year, and I mean, it's been better than expected. I don't want to sit here and tell you he's been good because the Raiders haven't had that many players that have been good, but he's 24 years old. He was a 5th-round pick, has been on a few teams, but has rarely played and has gotten a pretty good chance this year, and again, has been better than expected, and now he gets carted off. We'll see how serious that injury is. Pete Carroll said it was a serious injury, so I think there's a real chance that his season is over, which is unfortunate because, you know, the Raiders have a lot of holes, and you probably want a better cornerback than Caillou Blue Kelly starting for you. But given that there's a bunch of other holes, they could have reasonably gone to the next year saying, all right, he's going to be 25, and he had a decent season, so he could be one of our starting corners next year. Now that injury might change things depending on how bad or how serious it is and how far behind he gets set. And also, it's just hard to count on guys coming back from injury, even if he is completely healthy. Now, a few other things in college football. One thing for me to yell out, if you watched Ohio State and Indiana in the Big Ten championship game, Ohio State's kicker missed a field goal with 2:49 left when they were down by 3. It was 4th and 1 at the Indiana 9-yard line. He misses this field goal. Indiana's up 3. They go and run the clock out. Ryan Day in Ohio State took the points. Anytime somebody goes for it on 4th down and field goal range, you hear the criticism. You should have taken the points. Why didn't you take the points? This is why that's stupid criticism. What happens if you miss the field goal? There were no points to be taken. There were no points. The kicker missed. And yet, there's basically no criticism of Ryan Day for kicking that field goal because for some reason, when it comes to fourth down decision making, if the kicker misses the field goal, we don't blame the coach for kicking the field goal. We blame the kicker for missing it. But if you go for it on 4th and 1, we blame the coach for going for it instead of blaming the players for failing to execute. It's this bizarre contradiction where we only blame the coach in one scenario for failure, when in reality, he should have gone for it on 4th and 1 at the 9-yard line. He should have been trying to, 1, score a touchdown to take the lead, but 2, run the clock out, right? You want to get that first down, set up 1st and goal, and best case scenario, you run a few more plays, you kill a bunch of time, you take a 4-point lead, and now Indiana's got to drive the length of the field with 40 seconds left or something like that. That would have been ideal. Instead, his best case scenario was tie the game and give Indiana the ball back with 2.5 minutes to go. That's just not a good plan. Take the points. You love to hear it, especially when the kicker actually misses. Also in college football, Notre Dame has declined to play in any bowl game. Brett McMurphy reported that Notre Dame was lined up to play in the Pop-Tarts Bowl against BYU, and Notre Dame said no. Notre Dame's a bunch of losers. That's pretty clear here. BYU Notre Dame would have been a fun bowl game to watch, especially with Pop-Tart on the line. I am a little surprised they said no just because, did the players not want to play football? I guess not. I'm assuming Notre Dame would have played if the players were like, nah, dude, we don't play football, right? In all seriousness, I know they missed the playoffs. It was heart-wrenching and the same day, hey, dude, you want to play in the Pop-Tarts Bowl? But a couple of weeks from now, you don't think Notre Dame players are going to be like, damn, I wish I was playing football right now? I wish I was playing in a fun game for a Pop-Tart. I don't know. Seemed a little disappointing. But the important note here is this is what college football has to deal with. And maybe the deal ends up being bowl games get killed off entirely, but this is the reality of it, right? Teams don't want to play in bowl games if they have playoff hopes. It's a down into the season. Notre Dame thought they were going to the playoff yesterday, and instead they get invited to the Pop-Tart Bowl, right? That's bad, right? That's deflating, and you can understand why they would say no to that, even if they are being a bunch of losers. Now, we had 2 other teams say no to bowl games. Iowa State and Kansas State are going to sit out, and the Big 12 is fining both of those teams $500,000. Iowa State went 8-4 this season, but their head coach, Matt Campbell, just left to take the Penn State job. Kansas State, I think they were 6-6. Their head coach retired. So both teams lost their head coaches, but because they were bowl eligible, they're still getting fined by the Big 12. There have been a handful of 5-7 teams that have said no to a bowl game as well. So 5-7 teams, you might understand it a little bit more, but we've got a lot of teams that are saying, no, thank you. We do not want to play in a bowl game. Now, for the bowl game here in Vegas, the Las Vegas Bowl, we're going to have Nebraska take on Utah. Utah 10-2, really good season in the Big 12. Nebraska finished the year 7-5. They lost their last 2 games to Penn State and Iowa by scores of 37-10 and 40-16. Not a good finish to the season, but they lost their quarterback Dylan Raiola to a broken leg earlier in the season, and then it kind of spiraled from there. They actually had a pretty good season and a chance to do something, be ranked until that leg injury. They're also kind of interesting, right? Because Dylan Raiola was the number 1 quarterback recruit in the country a couple of years ago, goes to Nebraska, starts as a freshman, breaks his leg this year. But over the weekend, Nebraska fired Dylan Raiola's uncle. He was the offensive line coach there. And maybe Dylan Raiola is going into the transfer portal. That's been rumored even before they fired his uncle, but now even more so that his uncle is fired. So Nebraska's a little interesting in that regard. But I am going to be a hater really quick. I say really quick as if I'm not doing that every single day on here for 30 minutes to an hour. But the Las Vegas Bowl moved into Allegiant Stadium when Allegiant Stadium was built and completed here in Vegas. They dumped the Mountain West, and the selling point was that we're going to get big-time games, big-time conferences, big-time teams to come in. Utah's ranked. They went 10-2, cool. But 7-5 Nebraska with a injured starting quarterback? So what it means is the first 5 games of the Las Vegas Bowl in Allegiant Stadium, of the 10 teams to play in it, Utah will be the 2nd ranked team. 2 ranked teams in 5 years for the Las Vegas Bowl. If you go back to the last 5 Las Vegas Bowls at Sam Boyd Stadium when Mountain West teams were coming, 4 of those 10 teams were ranked. So we haven't even seen an improvement on quality of teams, right? Maybe the brand name is better, but we're getting 7-5 Nebraska. We're not getting 1990s Nebraska. We're getting 7-5 Nebraska, right? We're getting down LSU or down USC or whatever it is. The Las Vegas Bowl hasn't really jumped up in quality. And we should probably blame the playoff for that. If there wasn't a playoff, then there's not 12 teams getting sucked into the playoff, and instead we get better games down the bowl system. But ultimately, the Las Vegas Bowl is not producing the matchups that we were told they were going to get because of Allegiant Stadium. But this has been Bischoff's Briefs. Again, big shout out to Rob for sponsoring Bischoff's Briefs. Rob, we love it. Go Army, beat Navy. I hope it happens. It's the first time I've cheered for Army or Navy in one of these games. So go Army, beat Navy. Now we rewind to Friday night where UNLV lost the Mountain West Championship to Boise State and gave us this wild stat. Over the last 3 years, UNLV is 0-5 against Boise State. They are 18-3 against the rest of the Mountain West. 18 wins in 3 years, conference wins in 3 years, is almost unbelievable for UNLV because you have to go back before this 3-year run, the previous 8 years to get to 18 Mountain West wins. 8 years, they've done it in 3. That part of the stat's incredible. 0-5 against Boise State is pretty brutal, especially when the average margin of victory in those 5 games was 17 points, right? Save for one of those games, they were basically uncompetitive in them. Huge gut punch, right? The 3 years, it's like the best 3 years in UNLV football history, and you don't get the conference title of it out of it. You don't get to beat the top team in the conference even one time. Like, it's just this frustrating end because you never got that crowning moment. You never got that we did it, we won the conference, or even just a we did it, we beat Boise State. You didn't get that. It feels a lot like the baseball team that makes the run in the playoffs but doesn't win the World Series. There were great moments. You should look back on it fondly, but there's always going to be that tinge of damn, right? It's what the Blue Jays just did. The Blue Jays this year, regular season was great. Their postseason run was great. But if you're a Blue Jays fan, are you ever going to think of this year for anything other than losing the World Series, right? You lose Game 7 of the World Series. You had 2 chances at home. That's what it feels like, where it's like, it's been awesome. The best you've seen, but it's just you don't get that moment where you can sit back and say, we're on top of the mountain. We did it. Crown us. We won something. It's just all right, we're going to the Frisco Bowl. It kind of sucks. Now, in that game itself, 2 things I thought was interesting. UNLV's run game got stuffed, specifically the running back carries, the Jaden Thomas carries there. Anthony Calandria scrambled for a good chunk of yards, but Thomas had 10 carries for 41 yards. He ripped off a 23-yarder in the second half. That was really the only good running play with Jaden Thomas in that game. He came in over 7 yards per carry, was ripping off big runs a lot. So that part of it was disappointing. The offense basically became Anthony Calandria running around trying to make plays, right? Anthony Calandria freestyling, right? And he did sometimes, right? They put up some points in this game, but not nearly enough to keep pace with Boise State's offense. Calandria only completed 18 of 38 passes, too, by the way, which was a brutal completion percentage for somebody that was at the top of the Mountain West this season. Ran 10 times, got sacked 2 more. There was a lot of Calandria, right? That's, 50 plays of Anthony Calandria trying to do something in a game that they were chasing, right, with Boise State. A lot because you can point back to that UNLV just had no success running the football. The other part I thought was interesting was UNLV, it looked like they sold out to stop the run. So Boise State ran a lot of 2 tight end sets, which invites it, but UNLV loaded up the box against Boise State, right? Even on some snaps without the 2 tight ends, they had a lot of guys in the box. And it kind of worked. Dylan Riley, the Boise running back, only averaged 3.6 yards per carry, right? He was, 9 in the regular season matchup. So they shut down Dylan Riley in that regard. But UNLV got torched in the secondary, right? A lot of one-on-one matchups there in the secondary. And they got beat. They also got beat specifically on passes out of the backfield where like a safety had to cover a running back and they just couldn't close the gap in time. And it would be a throw to the flats to the running back, and then he's picking up a bunch of yards because the safety can't get there in time. So I thought they needed to sell out to stop the run. They did that. They had some success, but it wasn't enough to actually slow down Boise State because Maddox Madsen actually had a pretty good game as Boise State's quarterback. And don't know that it changes the outcome, but Dan Mullen had a bad game. From a game management standpoint, there were 4 moments in this game. The first 2 were simply timeouts, right? 2nd and 21 in the third quarter. And Dan Mullen calls timeout to avoid a delay of game. It's 2nd and 21. What's the difference in 2nd and 21 and 2nd and 26? Not much. By the way, out of the timeout, UNLV lost 3 yards on the next play. Then they had an incompletion, Calandria threw it away, and they punted. Just Mullen completely disregarded the value of a timeout there, right? If you're going to come back and win this game, you're almost certainly going to need all 3 timeouts to stop the clock late, not to prevent a 2nd and 26, right? That's the wild part to me. It was to prevent a 2nd and 26. Both are bad. Don't burn your timeout there. Understand the value of the timeout. The next one wasn't as bad, but he again had to call timeout to avoid another delay of game. This time it was 3rd and 6, and UNLV was in the red zone. Call a timeout. They come out on 3rd and 6. Calandria drops the snap and had to throw it away. Worked well out of the timeout. Now, they did go for it on the 4th down. They got it and scored a touchdown, but it was still another wasted timeout. Beyond the wasted timeouts, the worst Dan Mullen decision in this game, 4th and 2 at his own 33, down 14 with 12 minutes to go, and Mullen punted. Disaster of a decision from Dan Mullen, right? Why are you taking your offense on the field when you've got to score 2 more times? You're down 2 possessions in the 4th quarter, and it's 4th and 2. Leave your offense on the field. I mean, was it the best offense in the Mountain West or not? Did you have the Mountain West Player of the Year in Calandria or not? You're going to punt it and say, all right, we'll get a stop on defense? Like, trust your offense. It's 4th and 2. Go get 2 yards. You need to score a lot of points in not a lot of time. And you punt the ball away. Just a terrible 4th down decision. And then the last one, and I think this is the least bad, 3rd and 25. They're down 14 in the 4th again, and they ran the ball. They somehow ran the ball for a loss on that play. You're not even giving your offense a chance, right? More importantly, give your offense a chance to go for it on 4th down, right? If you pick up 15, this was later in the game. If you pick up 15 yards and it's 4th and 10, you can actually go for it. Instead, they lost yards and they punted. Just pathetic play call. Like, do something to try to pick up some yardage that maybe you get the first down. Maybe you get a penalty. But at the very least, maybe you get 10 yards and it's 4th and 10, 4th and 12, and you can go for it in that scenario. Just not great. Dan Mullen didn't give his team the best chance to win, right? Was the defense good enough in that game? No. Was the run game good enough? No. But the coaching decisions weren't either. That's a big problem, is when you have those game management decisions that are just simply not good enough. By the way, he wasn't the only one. Spencer Danielson, I thought, made a baffling choice. Boise State gets the ball, 49 seconds left in the first half. They're up 14 at the time, but they ran the clock out against a defense that they had no problem scoring against. They just elected to throw a possession away. They could have gotten in field goal range. I mean, hell, they could have scored a touchdown. But they coach scared all the time. And this is one of those situations. Like, he was more afraid of UNLV's defense, like getting a turnover and it leading to points and only being up 28-21 at halftime instead of 28-14. He was more afraid of that than he was optimistic about his offense going down, getting in a field goal range and making it 31-14 or 35-14. Coaches coach scared so often, and the part that annoys me is these types of decisions where, like, you should know going into the game, this is a scenario where you're going to try to score points. Right? You should already know that. It's pre-game planning, not in-game decision-making. And Danielson was just like, no, thank you. They won the game, so it's not anything to cry about, but it just baffles me that coaches make so many bad choices. Now, want to finish the show with some college football playoff. I love the college football playoff. It's so good. We got our top 4 teams to get buys: Indiana, Ohio State, Georgia, and Texas Tech. No surprise there. The matchups for the first round: Oregon's going to get James Madison. Ole Miss is going to get Tulane. That's a rematch. Texas A&M is going to get Miami, and Oklahoma is going to get Alabama. Another rematch. But here's my annoyance after the playoff field was revealed. People, especially in the media, people like me, way too upset about group of 5 teams getting in. And I just realized I'm going to sit here and tell you that Nick Saban is like me. But on the reveal show for the bracket, Nick Saban complained on ESPN, saying specifically the phrase he used was new criteria when talking about group of 5 teams, and basically said we need new criteria to keep group of 5 teams out of the playoff. Kirk Herbstreit said we don't have the 12 best teams in the playoffs, and then was like, we need to go to 16, which then he'd just say we don't have the 16 best teams in the playoffs. Danny Cannell tweeted this out. We're all arguing about Miami, Alabama, Notre Dame, and overlooking that 2 group of 5 schools are occupying spots when they have zero business playing in it this year. The 12-team playoff put in a rule that the 5 highest-ranked conference champs get into the playoffs. There are rules that determine who gets into the playoff, just like all of our sports. You set a criteria, who gets in, who gets left out, and you follow it. And here's the part that is, it almost makes me think people that watch college football don't watch other sports, because we have teams that make the playoffs every year that are undeserving. Look at the most recent baseball playoffs. The Cincinnati Reds went. They had 83 wins. The Houston Astros didn't make the playoffs. They had 87 wins. Nobody was clamoring to change the baseball playoffs because a team with 4 fewer wins got in, right? 2 years ago, I'm going to knock my mic over. Good job by me. 2 years ago, the Houston Rockets went 41-41 in the NBA. They didn't make the playoffs. They didn't even make the play-in. They were 11th in the West. 2 teams in the East, Chicago and Atlanta, were under 500 and got into the playoffs. One of those teams had 5 fewer wins than Houston and got in. Nobody was clamoring to change the playoff system in the NBA. In 2022, the Tampa Bay Bucks made the playoffs at 8-9 because they won their division. Steelers, Commanders, and Lions all had a better record than Tampa Bay. Did they get in? No. 4 times in the last 15 years has a team made the playoffs while under 500, and another team had a better record in the NFL. Last year in the NHL, Montreal and New Jersey made the playoffs with 91 points. Calgary missed it with 96 points. Those are our 4 biggest sports leagues. All of them in the last 3 years have had an example where an undeserving team got in over a more deserving team. Do people that complain about this watch other sports? This is how playoffs work. You set a criteria, and that determines who gets in. Duke won the ACC at 7-5. Tough shit. Like, James Madison's getting in over that 7-5 Duke because they're a conference champion. Win your conference championship or join one, Notre Dame, and you're going to have that access by winning your conference title game. And the people that hate the 2 group of 5 teams that got in this year, genuine question. Why do you hate college football? This is what college football is. Chaos is what makes college football great. The ACC not having a ranked champ is hilarious. It's one of the funnier things that can happen, right? And it opens the door for James Madison. And watching teams that are not traditional powers is part of what makes this sport great. Maction on Tuesday, awesome. Things like App State beating Michigan, phenomenal. Boise State running trick plays to beat Oklahoma. It's great, right? That's part of what makes this sport incredible. Watching Notre Dame and Alabama and Ohio State, the teams at the top, yes, I enjoy it. I'm going to watch all the playoff games, right? I'm going to watch Ohio State and Indiana in a rematch in the title game, or Georgia and Indiana, whatever it is. I'm going to watch it. I love that stuff. But part of what makes the sport good and part of what makes it matter is that we now have a way for Tulane and James Madison to play for a national championship. You can't have a sport where half the teams have no access to that championship, which is what all of these people are arguing for. They're arguing for take away the group of 5 spot. Make sure we have this, hey, you've got to be ranked in the top 12 to make it in the playoffs. Like, that's what they're arguing for. And that would mean that every single year, every group of 5 team doesn't have a chance. That is exactly what that would mean. I know Boise State was ranked in the top 10 last year, so they would have had a shot at it traditionally. But if you're going to have 10 conferences, you can't take half of them and say, sorry, you don't have a chance. Right? It's just, you're not the same league or division, whatever the hell you want to call it. Like, that's not what it is. There has to be access to the playoff if you're going to have a 12-team playoff. So stop hating college football. Stop hating on the group of 5 and tell teams to win their conference. Right? Wouldn't that be nice? Also, why do people hate BCS computers? Humans are dumb, right? Computers, BCS computers were better than this, right? Hunter Yurachek is the athletic director of Arkansas, and he's the head of the playoff committee. And he gets to go on ESPN and try to explain these rankings. And obviously, the big flashpoint of the rankings is that Miami jumped Notre Dame despite neither team playing on conference championship weekend. And I talked about this a little bit last week. If you look at it, both teams were 10-2, and if you go by strength of schedule, strength of record, FPI, SB+, game control, all these metrics the committee supposedly uses, they're all very, very close, right? And Hunter Yurachek said as much. He basically said, hey, same record, same resume. And he said, we went to head-to-head, and Miami beat Notre Dame, so they get in, which is exactly how it should have been. That is what should have happened. Miami should have been in over Notre Dame. The problem is that Miami was behind Notre Dame in every single ranking leading up to this one. Every single one. Neither team lost a game from when the first playoff rankings came out until the last, right? They both had 2 losses the entire time, but yet they kept Notre Dame ahead of Miami. And when asked why they flipped, Yurachek said that they didn't use head-to-head in any of the other rankings because BYU was ranked in between Notre Dame and Miami, and that they didn't consider head-to-head until Notre Dame and Miami were next to each other in the rankings. No one held a gun to the committee's head and said BYU has to be ranked between Miami and Notre Dame. Nobody did that. They chose that. They chose to rank them Notre Dame, BYU, Miami. They could have done BYU, Notre Dame, Miami. They could have done Notre Dame, Miami, BYU. They could have ranked those teams however the hell they wanted, but they chose this meat shield of BYU to be this buffer. And then when BYU lost, they were like, oh my God, did you guys know Miami beat Notre Dame? We didn't even think about that until BYU was out of the question. What the hell kind of a process is that? Again, between those two teams, they got the right one in, but what? Bizarre. The worst process you could possibly show. And it leads me to one last thing on the show today. I have seen so many media members come out and say they need to scrap the playoff rankings. We just need the final rankings on Sunday, just a Selection Sunday show. And the reason is that if there had been no previous rankings and on Sunday the committee said Miami's over Notre Dame, nobody would have blinked an eye because they beat Notre Dame, right? We'd be yelling about Alabama probably being in. We'd be like, wow, BYU got no respect, but we would not be complaining about this specific cause where the previous rankings created a problem for the final rankings. If you're a coach, yeah, complain about that. If you're an administrator or a player, complain about that. If you're a fan, maybe. But if you're in the media, do not complain about these weekly ranking shows. Are you kidding me? They produce tremendous content week after week at the end of the season, and they've produced this. This is hilarious. This is phenomenal, right? We got the committee talking themselves into knots to try to explain why they flipped 2 teams that didn't play on conference championship weekend. Don't take that away from us. This is great. This is what makes college football great. We argue about this dumb crap. This is what's phenomenal. We get to be like, why the hell is Miami behind Notre Dame for like 4 weeks? And then all of a sudden the committee's like, you guys were right. We never should have done that in the first place. Then we'd be like, where were you for the last month? It's great. Don't take it away from us. Do not do it. Please be greedy. Take the television money, college football, because I love these shows. That's it for Technically Correct with Tyler Bischoff. We're back for week number 2. I appreciate all of you listening around. I think this is going to end up being our longest show so far. It was a good one.